This really was a remarkable year. Sometimes words can't express how much gratitude we have for this team. And, there's so many thanks to go around because from top to bottom, there's some people that made some major sacrifices. That's what makes a great team, and that is a lot of people making sacrifices. And this year there was a lot. I want to thank our fans, first of all. I can remember in Game 6, this place was as loud as it's ever been for me. I've never felt it. I never felt that energy from the beginning to the end when we were playing very well. I felt like our fans really made a difference in this series, and it's fun to see that come back. We were worried a little bit at the beginning of the season, to be honest with you, with the changes. But our fans came back in droves, and it made a complete difference. I'd secondly like to thank Herb and Steve Simon. And on July 2nd, we were making a few trades, and they were pretty big trades. And we looked at a lot of different scenarios of what we wanted to happen this year. And I can promise you, Herb got in the room with Chad Buchanan, Donnie, myself, Peter Dinwiddie, and he challenged us to put together a team that he could be proud of, and that you're not really supposed to use the word tank, and we weren't looking at tanking, but there was an opportunity where we could have gone young. I presented that. Herb said, "Nah, it's not really the way I want to go. I want to be a fan." At the end of the day, he's our biggest fan, and he wanted to sit up in the stands and be proud of a team. So he said, put together a team that can go out there and compete, that can represent the city, the state, and allow these fans to come to games and have a chance to win. And so we went to work. We made a trade with Toronto. We signed a few free agents, and we were able to come together, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. I'd really like to thank our players. We added 10 new players this year, and I'm sure there's a lot of times where you add that many when you look around the league, but it's not a lot. That's probably a little unique. And then as they started rolling in September, I would say we started to get a feeling like, we've got a good group of guys that they're willing to do a few things. And we asked them to do a few things: play hard, play smart, and play together. And one of the things that's easy to look at and say, we have a superstar player. Victor is a superstar player, but those of you who were around Victor all this year and able to interview him and get close to him and become friends, as good as player as he is one of the most unique human beings around. We went through a couple times during the season where we lost a few games, and we'd come into the building and he'd be whistling and he'd be happy and he'd be jovial, and I'd say, "What's going on? What, aren't you a little worried? Can we get back on track? What's the deal?" And it was like there was no doubt we were going to get back on track. And he said something to me that I will never forget. It's like I've learned from Victor Oladipo that no matter how your day goes, no matter what's going on in your life, you always have the right to hit the reset button. And Victor said, "You know what? I just hit the reset button every day. That's all I do. No matter what happens the night before in a game, in the morning I hit the reset button, I come in, and I'm ready to go and change that day and make that day the best I possibly." And for me, that's something that I've tried to learn. That's something that it's amazing that we bring in a 25-year-old kid and we're learning from him. And then the last thing I'd like to say in terms of thank yous is to the man to my left. And, I feel myself getting a little emotional here.
Don't do it.
We've worked a lot of years together. and we've had our disagreements and we have our agreements. But I can promise you, as a head coach, there is no job more difficult in this league. A head coach has a lot of spears pointed right at him after every minute, after every game, after every day, after Monday mornings. And I couldn't be prouder to be working next to a man like this. He's dedicated. He wants to do it the right way. He's evolving as a coach. I saw a different Nate this year. I challenged him on a couple things every week, and that is to try to enjoy for lack of a better word, the process, and to develop the heck out of this team, to get better. And I'm so proud that I get to work by and with Nate McMillan and his staff. And his staff is, in my opinion, the best in the business, from Dan Burke to Popeye Jones to David to Bill Bano. They work. I mean, it's amazing. Games are over. They get on the plane. They're immediately watching film for the next game. They're waking up. They're getting prepared. And I joke with some of the guys. Literally, we go through, pounds and pounds of coffee. I mean, we need a big sponsorship from coffee, because we're going through some coffee. And that's the part of the grind that, it's a little bit underappreciated. But at the end of the day, I'm lucky to have Nate McMillan as my partner. And the one thing that I think is probably super important is that this business is so interrelated. It's even hard for me to describe how interrelated it is. Some of the decisions that Peter and Chad and Donnie and Larry and I make affect him in a deep way. We give him players that he can go coach, and we look for players that fit his style. And then how he develops, like a Victor and a Domas and a Miles, affects how we do our job. And so sometimes, it's a marriage between the two parties, in that we can help each other, and specifically if we can have an open dialogue all the time. We don't agree on everything. We have a thing, agree, disagree, but we unite. And I think that was prevalent this year. The last thing I'd like to say before he opens up is that when we started this season, we had a couple things. We didn't have any goals to win. That wasn't our mantra. It was really to set a culture of development and get better, and that we really established what we wanted from these players cultural-wise. So we talked about something called 3T, together, toughness, and trust. And that really, all the time, I'm texting, I'm putting things up, and Nate's talking about them, and we wanted to be about that this year. And our players bought in. Our players made huge sacrifices. And in days of major contracts and big business, we ask our players to say, let's put all the egos and the selfishness aside and come together as a team and overachieve, because no one thinks you can do it. No one thinks you can do it. And the one thing I know, we were, I think, predicted to win about 30 games or 31 games. And, I joked with the guys in preseason, and, I saw them coming in September, and there was no doubt in my mind we weren't a 30. I didn't know what we were, but I knew we had a chance to overachieve. And for me, at the end of the day, I'm going to do something different from here on out right now. And that is, and Nate and I just talked about this, is in this business, it's such a grind day one to the end of the season. And the seasons always end abruptly, and you're like, oh my gosh, season's over with. But for me, I'm going to sit back. I'm going to have a glass of wine. I'm going to enjoy this season. And to me, I've never done that in my life. I've never sat back and said, okay, season's over with. Let's already start grinding on the next. I'm going to take some time, a few days maybe, and then we'll get back after it and try to figure out how to make the team better.